A few days ago, I was doom scrolling on Facebook, and I came across this image of a saint named Andrew Wouters. Has anybody heard of Andrew Wouters? Nobody. Me either. I never heard of him either, and I thought, is this AI? Because it said, adulterous, drunkard, saint. I'm like, what? So I had to actually look it up to see, is there really a St. Andrew Wouters? Well, there is, and he was born in 1542, and he lived in Holland, and when the Calvinists invaded his territory in 1572, he was only 29 or 30 years old. Father Andrew Wouters had been a priest for a few years and was a pastor of a parish. He had fathered a number of children out of wedlock and was a notorious drunkard. But he was arrested along with a number of other priests. And he was interrogated by the Calvinists and encouraged to recant his faith, to reject transubstantiation and the authority of the Pope. Now, a number of the priests that he was arrested with, in fact, did recant their faith and reject the faith. And even when his sins were thrown in his face by his accusers, Father Andrew said, "Fornicator I have always been, a heretic I have never been." And he was hung. And there's a painting of this martyrdom of Gorkum, is what it's called, and it's in the Vatican Museum, and it's a really imposing painting. And as I was looking through my pictures from my trip to Rome, I came across that painting, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. This is a really impressive painting of these religious priests hanging from the gallows. And I never really put two and two together, but then I realized what this is. He was canonized in 1867, the 1800th anniversary of the death of Saints Peter and Paul, the martyrdom of Saints Peter and Paul by Pius IX. Anyway, Andrew Wouters is the patron saint of those who struggle with moral weakness. Why do I bring this guy up? Well, he is a saint that is a parish priest. Some people say there's only one parish priest that's ever been canonized. That's St. John Vianney. Well, here's another one. Maybe not a great example, but nonetheless, another patron saint. Well, I don't know. He's not the patron saint of parish priests, but he is a parish priest that is a saint. As we reflect on this encounter that Jesus has with this Canaanite woman in the region of Tyre and Sidon, there's really two things that we should think about. First of all, she's a Canaanite. So she's not even a Samaritan, she's a Canaanite. She's a foreigner of foreigners. And when I say that, this region of Tyre and Sidon was a point of shame for many of the people in Israel, because it's the first region that was invaded by the Assyrians in the 8th century. And so it's always been kind of a place of shame for the nation of Israel. But she's a foreigner of foreigners because she's not even Jewish by descent. She's not even a Samaritan. She's actually a foreigner, a Canaanite woman. So there's even more prejudice by the disciples against her. And what Jesus is doing by his words is embracing the prejudice of his disciples. You could see that his disciples are irritated by her. And their own mindset is that Jesus has come to save the nation of Israel. He hasn't come to save the world. He's come to save the nation of Israel. And so Jesus is kind of reflecting back to them their mentality, that he's only there to save the lost sheep of Israel. But by offering her request, he's opening the minds of his disciples to the fact that, in fact, he has come to save more than just the house of Israel. He has come to save the world and everyone. Now, if we reflect on the very last words of St. Paul in his letter to the Romans today, St. Paul points out that we have all sinned and we have all fallen short of what is expected for us. We have all thus become disobedient in the eyes of God. We all stand in need of God's salvation. There was a heretic in the 4th and 5th century named Pelagius. Pelagius argued that if a person was born in a good enough family, they could live their life and never sin. And in fact, they could even save themselves. Well, it's St. Augustine who develops the concept of original sin to explain how we all, with the exception, of course, of Mary, who was born without original sin, and he even makes this exception, are born with original sin and thus stand in need of God's salvation. God's salvation, we are all in disobedience. We all are in need of God's mercy. Without the sacrifice of Christ on the cross and without a share in the fruits of that sacrifice, particularly through the Eucharist, we all stand, in a sense, in sin and without God's salvation. The expansiveness, though, of what that means for us, it means that we all, no matter how sinful we may be, have the possibility of salvation. And even no matter the prejudices, the cultural prejudices that people may hold against us, we still stand in the possibility of salvation. And thus, we should never give in to despair, the inclination to think that we are unworthy of God's mercy, or that we have sinned so much that we cannot be forgiven. Not only can we be forgiven, but we can even perhaps go so far as to stand up to the faith, for the faith, to the extent of becoming a canonized saint, like Father Andreas Wouters. So as we continue our celebration today, we simply pray for that grace to open our own minds to the reality that Christ has come to save all, no matter how sinful, no matter how distant they may be in culture or in practice. Christ has come to save all, and we are all called to be instruments of bringing that good news into the world. And that good news even belongs to us who are sinful.